Hello and welcome to HitMic, where we love to talk about the latest trends in healthcare marketing. I'm Colin Hung, and with me today is Grace Vinton, Account Director at Amendola Communications and overall media guru. Grace, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Colin. It's great to be here.
I am looking forward to this conversation because it's always fun having a talk with you, whether we're at a conference or whether we're in person at the HitMic conference or like this over Zoom.
I know it's great that we get to connect this way.
Now, I have to say right off the bat, you are, of course, a media veteran. You do a podcast, you do a ton of stuff online. So this will be a great conversation because I know you're going to kick butt.
Thanks so much. It's fun for sure. Healthcare industry is always moving and changing, and there's always something to talk about.
So let me start with this question for you, Grace. You've been in the PR game for a long time. You're very, very good at it. I get a lot of your pitches and I love reading them. What does it take to be a successful healthcare PR professional today?
Yeah, well, I have a bunch of healthcare PRPs that I like to say that really stand out when it comes to healthcare PR and what makes a good healthcare PR person. First is purpose. You have to have a lot of purpose. You have to be mission driven. You have to know that as a healthcare PR professional, you're a part of the life-saving process. People are relying on you to get them life-saving information about life-saving technologies, life-saving research, et cetera. And so it's very critical for you to have that give you a sense of urgency in the work that you do. You have to have persistence and patience. It's a long game, not a short game. And that means constantly and regularly developing branding and messaging and being on top of trends that are happening in the industry and being connected with your clients and knowing what matters to them and knowing what matters to their customers and the audiences they're trying to reach. So that's really critical. And then there's people. PR is the sword and the customer is the hero. So it's really important that you tell those patient stories when you have them, you tell those physician stories when you have them, and that you get those stories out into the industry, because once you put people into the overall storyline, it makes all of these stories real. And then, of course, policy. So when you're in healthcare, you have to become a policy expert, whether you like it or not. Got to learn how to read the regulations. You have to be 10 steps ahead. And one of the ways that I do this is to just keep track on Twitter, to be honest. CMS, ONC, they put out things regularly about, things that they're interested in or things that they're putting out that are important for people to know. And so for PR people, it's critical for us to become policy experts if we're going to do good PR in healthcare.
I love the analogy that you just used there about PR being the sword and your customer being the hero, and how you highlighted that there is a nobler purpose to PR and marketing overall in healthcare. Like the more success we can help your clients achieve, the better that their product will be adopted, which usually means that either patients will have a better experience, or physicians will, or clinicians will. So there is sort of this nice noble cause to what we do here at healthcare marketing.
Absolutely. And I think early on, people confuse it. They think their clients are the hero and they're saying, this is what my client does and they're amazing. And in fact, it's their customer that is. It's their customer that's saving lives, and they are the tool that's giving their customer the opportunity to do that.
Amazing. If you, and I have to say, we have to highlight the fact that you did win the 2022 Medici HitMic Award for Marketer of the Year in the agency category. So congratulations again on winning that award.
Thank you so much.
And I think that just is a testament to all the great work you've done, not only in the past year, but in years past. I think it's a culmination of all of that. But if you look back at yourself a few years ago, or maybe when you first started in healthcare PR, is there some piece of advice or something you would have told yourself or you would like to tell yourself from back then?
Absolutely. I think I wish that I had started reading policies myself sooner.
Okay.
I relied on my customers to tell me when things were important to them or important to their audiences. And it totally changed the game when I started understanding the policies and how they fit into the general landscape. And I could then go to my clients and say, hey, are you tracking this? And they're saying, actually, we are, and this is what we're hearing. Or I can go to the media and say, hey, are you tracking this? And they find that I'm a more reliable person to talk to and speak with, because I know what's going on. And so I try to be a few steps ahead of that. Also, I think it's really important that if you are doing media relations, that you are not just pitching the story, but you're pitching the reporter. And so having an understanding of trends is great, but it's actually really important that you follow the trajectory of amazing journalists like you, Colin. Understand like the types of stories you would write and the types of people you would interview, and then go do your media relations that way. Understand what the journalist wants, and then develop the storyline and work your way through. And I think doing it in a more personalized way helps tell the story in a more powerful way.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that I'm a journalist. I don't see myself as one, but thank you for saying that. Now, this kind of goes back to something you said before about the people side. I mean, one of the things that I know that you do very well is that personal relationship or establishing relationships with members of the media, right? You really get to know them. When you see them at conferences, you're always saying hello and giving the hugs and all that kind of stuff. How important is that relationship to your success in terms of all the stories you're pitching and just knowledge of the policies that you talk about?
To me, I think it's really critical, because I think it's very important in healthcare that you have trustworthy relationships with people who are telling the right stories, and that you are being honest and open and real with people so that they can trust you, and that you are doing the same with your clients, and you're telling the story in an honest and truthful and trustworthy way. And so I think it's really important that you build relationships with people, because it's important to build relationships with people in whatever community you're in, whether it's personal or it's work or whatever the like, and you celebrate journalists when they do a great story or they do a great interview, because ultimately you're working with them too. They're your colleagues. They rely on you for important information and trustworthy information and forward thinking information. So I think anytime you can build a relationship with anyone, it's important. And then when it comes to work and when it comes to media relationship, it's even more important.
Yeah, well, I can definitely tell you that it works for me, because whenever your pitches come through, I do read them, because I was like, oh, of course, this is Grace stuff. So she wouldn't be sending me anything that I wouldn't at least be
well,
a
and
little
that's
bit
something
interested
I always say is friends don't pitch friends junk. I'm not going to send something to somebody that I know they're not going to want to cover. And if they don't cover it, I'm okay with that, because to me, I'm a helper. I'm trying to help the media understand the landscape, understand the different conversations that are happening. So if the email's only helpful in helping them understand a landscape a bit better and it doesn't turn into anything, that's fine to me. I think that's kind of critical, is don't just pitch. You're never going to build a relationship with someone if you're sending them junk mail.
Well, I want to touch on something you just said there. When you send a pitch, you're not expecting every pitch to be accepted, and in your mind that's okay, because you're just trying to be helpful. Marketing, especially in healthcare, but PR even more so in healthcare, there's a lot of ups and downs. I'm assuming there could be weeks where you're just not getting any nibbles on any of the stories that you're helping to try and push out there. So there's some down weeks and very high highs as well when you do get those media placements. How do you navigate those down weeks?
A lot of patience and persistence for sure. And then also understanding that you need to pivot. There are times where you absolutely need to pivot. And if a certain story is very fascinating to you, you are shocked that HL7 changed their standards, or you're just shocked that something happens, but it's not as shocking to other people, then maybe you need to shift the type of story that you're telling about it. And maybe you need to get creative. So I think there's a lot of creativity, a lot of pivoting, and a great conversation with your clients regularly about what they're seeing, and if you're having those regular conversations, you should be getting more and more trends and different things that are happening in the industry that might be editorially interesting. And sometimes it's taking a grain of an idea or a grain of a piece of data that your client pulls, or a grain of something, and building on that grain into something bigger than it possibly could be. And it's funny because the more tailored your conversations are with the media, the more likely they are to cover it, because it's tailored towards something they hadn't written in the past, or tailored towards something they, probably should or might write about.
Yeah, you're hitting on something there. Like we do as journalists, have to keep track of the latest things happening in the industry. And when there are tectonic changes, like NHL 7 update, or like a new policy from CMS, we're expected to cover it. We may all cover it in different ways. Like we may talk about the implication on this area of IT or this area of healthcare, but by you keeping up with that as well, then you're probably pitching something that is more likely to be something we want to write about or need to write about in the moment. So definitely a pitch for a trendy topic can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, and I try my best. I don't always get it right, but at the same time, I think they're all building blocks towards a greater relationship and a greater understanding of what's happening in the industry. And I also try to stay positive in what's happening. There's so much negative news out there that PR people can choose. We can choose whether we want to harp on the negative news and use that as our news jacking, or harp on some of the positive news that is things are changing. And PR people can be hope givers in the middle of a time when there's not a lot of hope to be found. So I think that's another thing that PR people that can really help you stand out, is to choose to tell those stories that are inspiring and encouraging and are changing the industry for better, so that care gets better for people, and care and it gets better for doctors that are trying to give it, and research is better, and the like.
Now, I have to ask you this. You do a ton of stuff outside of your 9-to-5 job. You have a podcast, you are an advocate. What time management tips can you give to the rest of us who struggle with all of those things?
Well, I think you really need to prioritize your health. You need to make sure that you're staying healthy, you're working out, and prioritizing eating right. I think if your body is healthy, you're able to fit more into your life. I prioritize reading to my children too. That to me is really important. If the rest of the day is busy with work things, at least I get that wonderful time with them where I get to just sit down with them and read a book, and they love it. I love it. And it helps my physical and mental health to do that. And then from like a work perspective, it's really important that you set goals at the beginning of every month. You say, this is what I want to do for the month. And those will change from month to month. So sometimes I'm in podcast zone and I want to get my podcast done one month. And the next month I may be in client building zone. And the next month I may be in. So I try to set, of course, my regular work hours. And then those extra few hours I have after or before work, I try to prioritize that monthly. And then on a weekly basis, I actually lay out on Monday morning who I'm going to speak with when, and I pretty much try to lay out my schedule, how it will look. And I set alarms, oddly enough, labeled alarms to keep me on track and make sure I'm getting my projects done. I'm very OCD when it comes to my schedule and my time, because time is so incredibly valuable and we don't get a lot of it in this world. And so really making sure that you prioritize the things you want to get done and finding time to get them done is important. And you can do that, I think, when you plan.
I am impressed, because the amount of stuff that you produce and the quality of it, it speaks to the amount of planning that you obviously do to do all of those things, because that's a lot of juggling.
And that another thing I recommend to people is put holds on your calendar for work. And I think sometimes people think, oh, we need to have all of our calendar open and free for whatever conversations. And I'm totally fine for that as well. People can brainstorm with me through text, et cetera. But I put holds on my calendar when I have to get stuff done. And I think that's helped me a lot too, in terms of taking most advantage of my time. And I put times on my calendar too for, some odd questions that people need to, to reach out to me about, or networking. Do like an hour of networking a week too. But it's really critical that you take advantage of your calendar instead of your calendar taking advantage of you.
I love that. You have, given us like 20 tweetable quotes here in this conversation. Everything from the sword to what you just said about you owning the calendar, not letting the calendar rule you. I mean, this has been amazing, Grace. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's always awesome chatting with you, Colin. And I was thrilled to be here, and everybody should go to HitMic. It's an amazing place to network with other people in the industry, to brain trust with people. I had a wonderful time this year, and I know I'm excited to meet you all next year.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that plug, by the way, Grace.
Oh,
really
for sure.
appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you're listening or watching. Also, head on over to hitmic.com, where you can access free resources, industry news, and insightful articles. You can also connect with us on Twitter using the hashtag HITMC. I'm Colin Hung, along with Grace Vinton. Thanks for being here.